So hello all and welcome again to today's webinar on the archaeology and history of the Delft, aka Minerva House. We've been uncovering the fascinating archaeology of London's Southbank as part of GPE's development. I'm delighted to say we're going to hear from two of my colleagues who've been working on this project with me. So first and foremost, I'm going to hand over control to Neralie, who was one of our site supervisors, who will be sharing the archaeology and history overview of the site. So Neralie, over to you.
Thanks, Kat. My name is Neralie Johnston, and I'm a senior archaeologist at Museum of London Archaeology. I'm here today to give you a brief overview of the history of the area and the archaeological discoveries found on the site and in the surrounding area. The site lies on the south bank of the River Thames at the heart of a rich historical area with the potential for important archaeological discoveries. Archaeological monitoring and recording is a formal program of observation, investigation and recording conducted during works carried out for non-archaeological reasons, where there's a possibility that archaeological deposits may be disturbed or destroyed. In 2023 and 24, MOLA was invited to monitor excavation work being undertaken during internal and external alterations to the existing building. In 2023, 5 predetermination trial pits were excavated, and though little archaeology was encountered, we did observe undated foreshore deposits, an undated timber pile and post-medieval brickwork. A foreshore survey was also conducted in 2023 just to the north of the site to record the state of preservation of previously observed archaeological assets. Historically, barges utilised a barge bed next to the wall in order to take the bottom of barges during low tide. The survey recorded that the timber barge beds were still in place despite erosion changing the profile of the foreshore. In 2024, monitoring including UKPN electrical cable trenches in Montague Close, underpinning of the walls in southeast corner of the building, and pile probing in main body of the building. Again, little was observed during these investigations, though we did observe post-medieval gravels, out of situ timber work, and worked and dressed stones. Out of situ, of course. The construction of Minerva House between 1979 and 1983 on the site of Hibernia Wharf likely removed any significant historical remains. So south of the site lies Southwark Cathedral, and 15 metres to the west is the scheduled monument of the remains of Winchester Palace, Clink Street and Waterfront. Historically, the Delft, aka Minerva House, itself lies on top of the medieval priory of St Mary Overy. On this site are shown the on this slide are shown the locations of known historical environment. It features within and close to the site. I'm not going to go into detail about all the archaeological excavations, but we'll give you a brief history of the area before I hand over to Ben. North Southwark is low-lying compared to the north side of the river. It lies over sand-capped gravels formed during the last ice age. The islands lay between channels of a much wider previous course of the River Thames. The foreshore was likely used in the prehistoric period for resources such as reeds, waterfowl, fish, eels and water. But evidence of periodic flooding suggests that the site would have not been suitable for longer term activity or occupation following rising water levels in the late prehistoric. The Roman and medieval occupation in Southwark was on these sand and gravel islands. The site itself lies to the north edge of one of these islands, which would have been connected to the north side of the river and the city by a bridge. Roman activity was recorded within the southwestern part of Minerva House, or the Delft site during a rescue excavation as part of a wider investigation of Montague Close in 1979 to 80, ahead of the development of the present building. Roman riverside activity was identified in the form of clay and timber building on timber piles, a roadside ditch, 5 wells, and a drain, along with a series of intercutting quarry pits and evidence of land reclamation. In the wider area surrounding the site, the Thames riverfront was extended northwards during the Roman period, with land reclamation during the early 2nd century AD. Investigations around Southwark Cathedral and Montague Close have found evidence of a resurfaced Roman road and ditch and clay and timber Roman buildings. An excavation on the site of the medieval palace of the bishops of Winchester to the west of the site revealed evidence of substantial Roman buildings and evidence of mosaic floors and a hypocaust, indicating the presence of high-status building with granary and a possible tower. Following the withdrawal of the Roman army in the early 5th century, the next evidence of activity on the site we see was recorded by the excavation of 1979 with the remains of a 4 to 5 metre wide ditch, possibly a continuation of the St Mary Overy dock inlet to the northwest. Also recorded were 3 deep rectangular possible domestic waste or cesspits containing Saxon period pottery. It remains unclear the extent to which the Montague Close area was settled permanently. Tradition has it that in the 7th century, a nunnery was founded beside the bridge on the site of Southwark Cathedral. In the 9th century, this was converted into a secular college by St Swithin, Bishop of Winchester. After being burnt down during the 1066 Norman settlement, under ownership of the Crown, Southwark became a thriving commercial suburb with a dock, trading shore and fishery. The site fell within the precinct of the Augustinian Priory of St Mary Overy, which was founded in AD 1106 on the site of a monastery recorded in Domesday Book. The eastern edge was lined with shops and houses facing the High Street. The religious buildings were sited to the north of the Priory Church, now Southwark Cathedral, near the river. In 1170, the Hospital of St Mary Thomas the Martyr, the precursor of the present St Thomas Hospital, was founded within the Priory precinct. In the 1140s, Henry of Blois, Bishop of Winchester, acquired the land to the west of St Mary Overy. In the northeast corner of the manor, he established his London house, which by the 14th century had become one of the most opulent residences in London. The west wall of the Great Hall still stands 40 metres to the west of the site. London Bridge underwent major reconstructions in timber during the 12th century until 1176, when construction began on a new bridge in stone, completed in 1209. This provided a secure crossing and opened up Southwark for development. By the later 12th century, the northern portion of the High Street may have been entirely lined with buildings. The location of the site in relation to St Mary Overy buildings is uncertain. The general layout of the Priory precinct is shown on Agus's pictorial map of 1562, wherein the river appears to have been fully embanked and buildings flanking the street, whose layout is preserved today. While the St Mary Overy dock inlet is shown along with Winchester Palace to the west, it is not possible to tell from the map exactly what buildings might have been on the site, although it does appear that the site is built up to the river wall. Following the dissolution of the monasteries by King Henry VIII, the site of St Mary Overy Priory, with its houses, gardens and orchards, was formally granted to Sir Anthony Browne, a staunch Roman Catholic and a close friend of Henry VIII. Montague House, the former priory, was named after Browne's son, Viscount Montague, and all associated land and outbuildings, ground of Morves, was sold as a commercial enterprise in 1625, and fine houses fit for men of better ability were built. Faithorne and Newcourt's pictorial map of 1658 shows the site was characterised by larger riverside buildings north of Southwark Cathedral. Montague House appears to have been turned over to industrial use as a Delftware pothouse in the late 17th century, with the former chapter house being made into a kiln house abutting on the church wall. This reference indicates that Montague House lay east of the walls rather than within it. The 1979 archaeological investigation in the southern part of the site found the base of a pit containing Delftware wasters, the imperfect material from firing, which would support the evidence for industrial activity on the site as part of a larger complex of pottery production facilities, chiefly known to the immediate north of the cathedral. Maps from the 18th century and early 19th century show the site and surrounds were occupied by warehouses and commercial premises in various states of repair, as well as a row of almshouses which were demolished in 1830 by the construction of the London Bridge approach. By 1881, a complex of dockside warehouses had been constructed, including West Kent Wharf and Hibernia Wharf, which themselves were demolished in the late 20th century. These basemented warehouses probably disturbed the earlier archaeology, as did the construction of Minerva House between 1979 and 1983, leaving little to be found during the archaeological monitoring and recording.
Yeah, thanks to Neralie for that whistle-stop tour through the history of the site. Quite a lot been happening in the area since, well, pre-Roman time, but certainly from the Roman, a lot of fighting with the river to claim some of that land back for use. So I'd say next up is going to be one of our specialists in building material, Ben Coleman. So because of the influence of these kilns and the name of the site, or the new site production being the Delft, aka Minerva House, Ben's going to tell us quite a lot more, excitingly, about the Delftware production and the kind of those kilns and information we can get from there. So without further ado, Ben, over to you.
Thanks, Kat. So I'm going to be covering not just Delftware, but the whole history of tin glazed tiles in London, which is quite a big topic. Delftware is only sort of the later end of it. But because it is such a big topic, if you do want to read more, I really recommend this book, Tin Glazed Tiles from London by Betts and Weinstein. It really covers it right from the start all the way to the end, and it's got a nice catalogue of all of the designs that have been logged. So we first start in Valencia. So from about the 14th to the 15th century, most of the tin glazed tiles that we find in London and the surrounding areas in England come from Valencia. They're mainly of this kind of monochrome blue design, very Moorish kind of motifs. But oh, sorry. So they were very uncommon though, because importation at the time, English tiles, while not being tin glazed, because we didn't have the technology to create these tin glazed tiles, didn't allow. So they were still a bit too expensive for the layperson to get. So it's very top of the top. But we do have some examples in some monastic sites in Surrey. So yeah, so by Fleet Manor in Surrey, we have this really nice Moorish design here, which is 15th century, but so it would have been from a pavement, but we're not too sure which one. We also have a couple of sites around Greenwich Palace where we have another Moorish design with only part of it missing. This is in, there are similars in the BM archive, the British Museum's archive, which, so we can kind of have a better understanding of the popular designs that were around Yeah, this is the one. So, sorry. It's of this very Moorish design. So we've got lots of flowers and very natural motifs that they have. So moving on, we have that production moves from Valencia in Spain to Seville in Spain, where we find a lot more of the examples that we kind of think of in these early tin glazed tiles. They come in two types, which I'm going to probably butcher the names of because I can't really do my Spanish that well. But we have the Curda Seca type, which is sort of how they do it is they paint on their glaze on top and then add on a sort of purplish pigment mixed with grease to create the different designs on it. And once they fire, that grease burns off and it sort of creates a hollow. So you get the hollow bits with the colors in, and it creates the designs on top. The other type is called the Arista type, which is sort of like the opposite of the Curda Seca. So instead of putting on the purple grease to burn out to get the design, when they're molding them, they form ridges. So the design is a bit more then the pigment is put in between. So you get these ridges along. So it's more of a 3D kind of look. So yeah, so this one that you see on the right-hand side is an Arista type. So you can kind of see where it's, oh no, sorry, that is a Curda Seca type. So you can, the picture's not very clear, but you can kind of see how the pigment is a little bit raised. So that would be where they've burned off all of this kind of grease. So actually, this design that we've got on the side was found in St. Bolsos in London. So we do have evidence of them switching over and bringing in the civilian tiles in rather than the Valencian. And then after that, as we move on, we get to Antwerp. So we know that the use of these Seville tiles in London was very short-lived. They were it's a very quick overlap from Seville into Antwerp in Belgium, where these date from about 1520 to 1540. They come in two different shape varieties. They are usually either classic square tiles that we still see today, or they come in very nice pointed hexagonal tiles. So yeah, this is Antwerp of the time. So it's beginning the industrialization. A key site in understanding our understanding of these Antwerp tiles is Bradwell Palace. So a molar site in 2013 yielded both civilian and Antwerp tiles at the same time. So we know there was probably at least two different pavements of these tin glazed tiles. It was built for Henry VIII between 1515 and 1523. So we can see kind of the overlap of the changing of what was thought of as kind of aesthetic at the time. So away from these civilian designs into the more Antwerp designs. So these are some of the fragments that we got from that site. So they're about mid 16th century, and you can see where it's very different from the civilian tiles where they have the raised kind of designs where these have been painted on with their pigment. And this is an example of the hexagonal mosaic I was talking about. So they were used in conjunction with other hexagonal tiles to form a larger pavement and mosaic. If you do get the Betts and Weinstein book, it has very nice diagrams of how these would all been laid out. So this is an Antwerp tile that we got from St. Bart's, which was a major hospital established around 1123. I picked this one because it's very good to show the design kind of motifs of the time. So we have the classic kind of medallion motif, which is square tile with big circle in the middle with the major design in the middle. in the centre of it. So it's got inscriptions in Latin, and it's got a nice cherubic image in the middle. This is another one we've got. So this is moving more into the tile pictures that were quite popular at the time. So during around the mid 16th century, the square tiles completely dominate the market, and hexagonal tiles kind of fall out of favor. So with the square tiles coming more favourable, tile pictures become much more popular in Britain, where they're large pictures that are painted over multiple different tiles, all in the Antwerp style. So they would be decorated with a variety of designs such as heads of figures, flowers, geometric and circular patterns, so it would all form this much larger piece. I think in this next one, yeah. So you can see here, I can't quite remember where this one is from, unfortunately. But you can see how it's taking it into a larger scale rather than the smaller pieces that would form a mosaic. This is all intended to be as a larger piece. So the period of greatest artistic activity in Antwerp was around 1520 to 1570, by which by the time the manufacture of Tinglaze tiles in London had just started to pick up, but only in small amounts, and the imports was still quite dominating. So despite this, even the tiles of this period that come from Antwerp, it's quite difficult to differentiate them from the ones that are being produced in London, because the ones that are being produced in London and England are being produced by immigrants from the Low Countries, Antwerp and Flanders. So it's still the same sort of people doing it. They're all being trained the same, but because they're the same people doing it pretty much, it's very hard to find any differences. So around that time of the mid 16th century, the spread of Tinglaze manufacture had come from the Low Countries and into England. This had a wide range of influences, mostly religious and political. So in the mid 16th century, craftsmen of all trades had to flee the Low Countries, mostly the southern Netherlands, because of the religious persecution onto the Protestants by the Catholics, the Spanish Catholics who were in control of southern Netherlands at the time. So they fled the southern Netherlands, went to the north, and also from the north, some of them then moved over into England. So a particular potter called Jasper Andrews left the European mainland for England, establishing his first pothouse in Norwich in around 1567. His brother, and his colleague Jansen produced what they called galley paving tiles and bottles for apothecaries in Norwich up until about 1571, when Jansen, his colleague, left for London. So in 1570, Jansen arrived in London and petitioned for a large plot of land by the river to continue his production of Tinglaze. This was, however, denied, and he was then left in 1571, the next year, to establish the more uncomfortable pothouse at Duke's Place in Aldgate. It was very cramped, as he didn't get much land, and it's about a kilometre away from the river, so it's not the ideal spot for manufacture. So this is an example of one of the tiles from the Aldgate pothouse. So it's late 16th century, 17th century, and it maintains a lot of the traditional Antwerp motifs that we can recognise from the earlier tiles. So again, we've got the medallion motif, and a nice picture of an owl in the middle. They loved a lot of natural elements in their designs. But what's important to note is that this is extremely contemporary with like the designs that have been made in Antwerp. So it's not easy to figure out which one's which. At around this time as well, it's very important to note that the London clay is not ideal for manufacture of these tin glazed tiles. You can see it here. London clay is usually this very red, dark red color once it's been fired. So a lot of the clay for it had to be imported in from Norfolk and Surrey, which is this band of yellow clay that you can see on top. But in classic British fashion, it's very expensive, so they have to cut some corners somewhere. And we see a lot of these experiments at the Aldgate Pot House. So what they've tried to do is to kind of, instead of having the whole tile be in this imported clay, they've taken a very thin sliver of it and tried to transplant it on top of a bed of red London clay. But this doesn't really work because they don't adhere properly, so they just fall off. We've seen a couple of examples where after firing or during firing, this white clay has either completely popped off or it's cracked and it's bobbled out because it's not flush. But it didn't stop the experiments with trying to cut corners. So what they end up developing is, instead of adhering them on top, they start mixing the clays together. And that's when we start to see the more London tin glazed tile. So instead of it being like this very nice yellowy white, that would be the pure clay from Norfolk and Surrey. They mix the London clay with this imported clay and start getting like a creamy, yellowy, whitish body instead. So now we've got Montague Close. We know it began at around 1613 when the owners Edmund Bradshaw and Hugh Cressy got a patent for earthenware in the manner of Fianza, which we believe is a reference to Fianza in Italy, which was a well-known centre for tin glazed pottery and tile manufacture, which in turn did influence the tin glazed manufacture in Antwerp earlier. So it was likely intended to produce floor tiles as paving tiles are mentioned in the patent that was put through. Something we haven't really covered yet is that it's important to note that tile manufacture likely took up a very small amount of the production at these pot houses over pottery itself, as it's especially with the site on Montague Close, we have very limited evidence of the tile manufacture during the molar excavations over the pottery. So we believe that pottery manufacture probably dominated most of the production here. But now we've got pickled herring. So unlike the Aldgate and Montague Close pot houses, there is far more physical evidence for the manufacture of tiles from the pickled herring pot houses in Southwark. It was opened around 1618 and continued until 1723. But the evidence we do have that suggests that the tile manufacture was limited to around the first half of the 17th century. So in excavations that were done in 1965 and 1973, there were large quantities of tile wasters found in dumps and other features that we had. So this is an example of one of the tiles that we had from Pickle Herring. It still continues that medallion motif and still sort of in the same design with the multicolour with the yellow, blue and green. But it's starting to show the kind of English, the proper English style of manufacturing these tiles, where it not to say they're not as good, but you can notice slight differences in kind of line work and how fine the work is. So I'm not sure if you can see, but you start to see smudges and little going over lines, not being able to paint within the lines. So this is another tile from Pickle Herring, and it's a good way so we can see the changing in motifs and what the aesthetics of these tiles. So we move away from kind of the big blocky ones into more mosaics. So we would get multiple of these tiles together to create a larger pattern all as one. One of these mosaic patterns that becomes very popular, of course, is the Tudor rose. So they were used all over in mosaic pavements, and it's one of the designs that we have most evidence for. So we can imagine that most pavements that had these tin-glazed tiles definitely incorporated at least some of these Tudor roses. So if you see in the corner of this one on the right, you get a quarter of it, and you'd have to have 4 of them all together to create this larger Tudor rose in the center. And now we move on to Conboy's Wharf. So Conboy's Wharf is a key site in Tudor London, being the headquarters of the Navy at the time, especially at the time of Henry VIII. So excavations by Moeller at Conboy's Wharf have yielded a Delftware tile here from the mid-late 16th century to early 17th century. And it shows the spread of these tiles and also kind of the manner of sites that would have these sort of tin-glazed tiles. So we're thinking high status with a lot of money behind it, pretty much. This is a map of the buildings in the City of London and its immediate area that had pre-1666 tin-glazed tiles, both wall and floor. So you can see here it's mostly monastic sites and high status buildings. So we've got Bermondsey Abbey, St. Peter's at Westminster, but also a lot of hospitals. So it really shows that only the wealthiest could afford these tiles, which explains the limited production of them and why these pot houses were mainly producing pot rather than tiles. Very few people could afford to have a full pavement of tin glaze. So this map shows the sites on the scale of the Greater London. So again, you can see here it's mostly monastic sites with a lot of high status buildings. So Greenwich Palace, like we talked about before, Charlton House. It's all these very high status buildings. One of these sites, 40 Hall in Enfield, it's a Jacobean manor house built around 1629 to 1632. And in recent excavations that were done here, we have evidence of a Delftware pavement. So it's showing the spread. So we know it's a London-produced tile. It's showing the spread of how far these are being travelled out. So at the mid-17th century, we get the advent of these kind of more classic 2-colour tiles, which I guess I would say are more identifiable as Delft tiles. So common motifs that we see at this time are these corner designs that we see in each one. So you can see it on this one right off in the far left, this sort of B shape. So we get rams, bees, flowers in the corner. And in the main design in the middle, we get sort of naval designs like this one. We get flowers, vases, figures. So there are quite a few with military figures as their main image. Bible scenes and landscapes become very popular around this time as well. A lot of also at the time, a lot of cityscape designs become a lot more popular. What's interesting about this is they're taking a lot of influence from sort of Chinese porcelain around this time. So there are a couple of tiles that are showing a cityscape, possibly Antwerp or London, but a lot of the roofs are done in a more Chinese style. I can't think of the right way to say it, but with their roofs are done in a way that is more Chinese than what they would have looked like in London or Antwerp. Oh, wrong. Okay. So in the mid 17th century, tile manufacture moves from floor to wall tiles, making them they were much more common in kitchens and around hearths. So we get a lot more evidence for them. Wall tile manufacture involved biscuit firing the tiles before the glaze was applied. So this is an example we've got from Bear Gardens in Southwark. And the idea is you'd kind of pre-bake it so you could paint on it a lot easier. From the same excavation, we got two of these wall tiles from Bear Gardens pothouse. And these are very good to show what I was talking about with how you can tell they are English tiles. So we don't, there is no easy way with the early tiles because it's the same people coming over and we can't really tell because they're all the same kind of level. But you can really tell with these that they're English made with sort of how crude they are. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but you can see like the lines aren't quite right. The line work is quite sloppy. Things don't join up. With this one, especially here at the bottom, someone's tried to do the joining line, clearly missed his mark, and then has just done it again. So I quite like because you can just tell it's someone who's just it's sort of you're learning from someone else who's learned from someone else. So the techniques aren't quite right. Whereas this is a Dutch tile from that's contemporary with the one we just saw. So again, mid to late 17th century, you got this one at Kensington Palace, but you can see, especially with this corner motif up here, the line work is very, very fine. Especially with the bird in the middle, it's very, very fine artistic work over the English tiles, which are a bit more sloppy. So this slide, we can see kind of an example of how they would be used, these wall tiles. So they're used a lot in kitchens, hearths, and sort of what are they called? Sides of walls, kind of border walls. So you can see it very clearly, especially in this one. Design tiles for flooring kind of fell out of fashion because if you think you're going to be walking on that all the time, the tiles aren't very hard wearing. So you've paid all this money to buy a very beautiful tile that you're walking all over, and the designs wear out, they get chipped, and it's a bit of a waste of money. So this one, you can see it in the fireplaces around. You can see it being used in the kitchen. And they're particularly used in kitchens around hearths because they're very easy to clean. So if you think about a hearth, you're getting all sooted up. If you wipe it down, it's immediately clean and you can see your decorated tile again. So around the mid 17th century, we start getting the Dutch versions of the two-color tile. Purple does come into some of these. It's not as popular as the white and blue, but there are examples of it. The white and blue is still, again, very influential of the Chinese style, so they're very popular. It's again a classic medallion style with these corner motifs that we see a lot. This is a ram motif, but it sort of shows the level of artistry that we get from the Dutch over the English. So the English wouldn't really try to do this sort of shading with the water or with the sails. So this is a contemporary tile of English production. Again, it's the crudeness of it. So you see the medallion design hasn't been fully done. there's just little intricacies that the English haven't quite picked up when it's come over. And we got this one from Bishop's Yard. So this map displays all the buildings in the City of London and its surroundings that have these post 1666 tin glazed wall tiles. It's not listed on here which ones they are, but it's the same as we saw with the last map, where it's a lot of high status monastic sites, but also, especially around here in Chelsea and Fulham, we're starting to see them move more into the middle class. So it's moving down the class. As more people are available to buy these. Again, this is a site of the Greater London area that has these tiles. So you can see it is branching out. They are slowly coming into more popularity with middle classes. One of these, which is quite good, is Dial House in Tottenham. It was constructed in around 1691 and featured a full Delftware fireplace. However, the building's interior was damaged by fire in 1976, but luckily the Delftware was undamaged, which you can see here. So these are Dutch-produced fireplace styles from around the 17th century, and you can see they're very fine line work that you can get. And they are now housed in the Bruce Castle Museum. So they have survived and they are still around, so you can see them. So we've got these are now some examples of where they would be used and how they'd be used. So we've got we've got Woodcote End House in Surrey, which is sort of this is an example of how they'd be used in the kitchens. You wouldn't have every tile being very nice design tiles. They are used in with these plain glaze. So they use sort of as borders around the room. We've also got Carshalton Water Tower out in Greater London somewhere, which was constructed around 1717 to around 1720. You'll see that a lot of these are around places that would have a lot of water or fire in the kitchen, where they get dirty and it's easy to clean. So these mainly consist of a very nice vase design with the flowers and nature, but do incorporate the slightly less popular purple as well as the blue. We've also got Queen Anne's Bath, which was constructed in 1683 and demolished in 1728. But we do have some lovely drawings of the time that display that it did have Delftware in its bath, in its actual baths. This is a fireplace surrounding the Deanery in Westminster Abbey, which is quite a slightly later one where the corner motifs start to fade out, but we get very nice full images on them. Very, very high artistry for these. They are the Dutch imports. But we still get the tile paintings you can see here. So it shows that even into the late 19th century, we are getting sort of the high artistry of it. And I'm not sure if it's very clear, but it still kind of maintains this kind of Chinese motifs with the buildings of this cityscape. This is another tile picture we got from Ingress Abbey, which we do know is London. So we can see as we're moving into the early mid-17th century, the artistry is improving in London. We are getting more skilled workers onto this. This is another one in the Deanery at Westminster Abbey. So it is Dutch, but we can see that over time, designs become a lot more simplified, and this is something we see with this. It's very common. It's very, can't think of the word, but the designs become much more simple. We get just an animal in the middle with keeping the corner motifs to keep that mosaic design. Again, with this, its designs become more simple. They're a lot more available, especially with this, the catalogue of the Dutch tiles. They are coming over, and we can see exactly the designs that were bought to come over to this fireplace in Croxley Green. I'm not sure how clearly you'll be able to see it, but 42 and 43 have been purchased from this catalogue and brought over to this fireplace, which is quite nice. William Morris also starts getting his hand in, and around, in the late 19th century, we start getting his tiles, his tin glazed tiles come in. But it was around this time, the late 19th century, that tin glaze manufacture kind of starts to fizzle out in Britain, and it starts solely being these imports. But that isn't the end of tin glaze, because we see in 1871 Frederick Garrard leases 3 cottages at the Millwall pottery to establish his own business of producing copies, especially of these civilian tiles from the 16th century. This is unfortunately quite short-lived, as he dies in 1893, and we have evidence that this manufacture stops then. So we have a good 20-ish period of these tin glazed tiles coming back. He also makes some copies of the 17th century Dutch tiles. So these are classic designs that we have from the period, but again, this sort of fizzles out with his death. Also at the same time, we get John Lewis James, who starts his own Delftware production where we get more classic English designs, but with the motifs of Antwerp and Delft. But I'll leave it there.
That's great stuff, Ben. Thank you so much. And I know, you're very excited about the top project, and I think I was as well, sort of like learning a whole load of stuff. So thank you very much for taking us through those tiles. It was amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, and goodbye. Have a lovely afternoon.